So one of the prompts we had was, what is the importance of gender studies in your field of work? And funny you'd ask, because if you consider my field of work to be philosophy, most people say it doesn't have any impact and it shouldn't have any impact because philosophy is about truth and women are somehow not, or gender is not really related to truth. But my actual field is feminist philosophy, in which there is a lot of impact of gender studies. So I think it's interesting, as given the event, to talk to you a bit about what is feminist philosophy, because there's been a whole debate in philosophy about could philosophy even be feminist, because feminist is supposedly a political endeavor, and by contrast to philosophy that is supposedly neutral and answering these big questions with objectivity. So here already, for those of you who work on gender studies, you see how all the feminist epistemology has been criticizing this supposed discrepancy between a neutral objective philosophy and political feminism. Because actually feminist philosophy today is a field of philosophy that contributes to the various sub-disciplines of philosophy. There are works of feminist philosophy in moral and political philosophy, which may seem self-evident, but also in metaphysics, in epistemology, in philosophy of language, history of philosophy, philosophy of mind, and it is characterized by a variety of approaches. At the very least, it can be said that what these different approaches have in common has to do with gender. And so, not in the sense of gender by opposition to sex, but precisely in the sense of what does gender mean exactly? Should we oppose it to sex? Should we consider it as the root of the binarity of our world, etc.? And so the polysemy of the term gender and the disagreements over its use within the field itself do not mean that it's a mistake to make it the common object of feminist philosophical work. Quite the contrary. Just as epistemologists have big fights about what knowledge is, just as political philosophers work on justice and as a result argue about this term, its definition, its content, it can be said that the centrality of disagreements about what gender is in feminist philosophy makes this concept, if not the main concept, at least one of the central ones of the field. And so the aim of feminist philosophy is to highlight the patriarchal order and to do so to deconstruct sexist ideology that allows it to function. It is on the basis of this project, which is both descriptive, so describing what the oppression of women is and how it looks like, and normative, showing that the patriarchal order is unjust and proposing just ways to remediate it, that the research axes of feminist philosophy are developed. So you could say that feminist philosophy has three main lines of research that are intertwined in everyone feminist philosopher's work. There's one, a critical history of philosophy that is aimed at analyzing the way in which traditional philosophy reflects and perpetuates the oppression of women. So it can be the fact that we don't read women philosophers, that the way gender is treated by traditional philosophy is in itself sexist, how it created gatekeeping about what philosophy is, etc. Then there's the analysis of the way in which the consideration of gender difference opens up new fields of research in philosophy. So I think a very good example about this is when you think about how, philosophers have this duality, like mind and body, for instance, or these oppositions between subject and object. But then when you take pregnancy into account, these dualities don't work anymore. Like you can't precisely, all the metaphysical oppositions between the self and the other, what do you go through when you're pregnant? You're precisely experiencing the fact that you're a self and another, and that you're full and like you're a unity, but you have a unity inside of the unity. So it destabilizes a lot of things about what it is to have these metaphysical claims about the world and how it's structured. So this is just an example. There are many others. And then the third point is the elaboration of a philosophy, first and foremost political and social, but also moral, epistemological, and metaphysical, that provides a framework for thinking about gender equality. So to put it another way, feminist philosophy is trying to propose a critique of the philosophical canon, to propose new objects as worthy of philosophical analysis, like reproduction, the family, sexuality, or sexual violence. I was giving a talk this weekend where I was talking about this fantastic feminist philosopher called Susan Bryson, who really wrote an entire book about how the experience of rape made her rethink what philosophy is, and calls for rethinking of what the philosophical activity is, because of a lot of unthinkable that happens during sexual violence, etc. So this is an example. So I haven't talked much about my research. But I wanted to participate in putting this out there. I've written a first book about why women submit to men. And my second book that will come out in English and in German this fall is about sexual consent. And what I'm trying to do as a teacher, because I think it's also very important, is to give the tools to students for these three tasks of feminist philosophy: thinking about history, thinking about new objects, and rethinking the philosophical activity in itself. Thank you very much.